The war to end all wars, they called it. While that was a false claim, it nonetheless described what was the Great War, the First World War. The events that would start this war were, in every way, tragic. It would all start with the death of one man and end with most nations coming to the aid of their allies. On June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist. This event would spark a war between Austria-Hungary and Serbia, which for every reason under the sun should have stayed a war between the two if not for one variable: military alliances. Serbia was allied with the titan of a nation, Russia, and Austria-Hungary was allied with the rising power of Germany. The following reactions led to the Great War. Russia, expecting to defend itself, mobilized its armies and assembled them on its border with Austria-Hungary. At the time, mobilization was seen as an act of war and impossible to take back. Germany, of course, demanded that Russia would withdraw or face war. Never receiving a reply, Germany would then declare war on Russia. Now, at the time, Russia had a defensive pact with both France and Britain. Germany declaring war on Russia prompted both France and Britain to declare war on Germany and, to an extent, Austria-Hungary. World War I had begun. In the first year of the war, leaders from the participating nations had made the same mistake that many had made before. They thought it would be a short war. Each country mobilized millions of soldiers through Britain, though Britain only had 100,000 soldiers available to fight in France, called the British Expeditionary Force. At the time, the United States was neutral like Belgium. Unlike Belgium, the United States had the Atlantic to separate it from the war, not just neutrality. On August 4th, in 1914, Germany invaded Belgium. The reason for this invasion was so that Germany could use the country as a shortcut into France. On August 20th, the German army captured Brussels, Belgium's capital, forcing the Belgian army to retreat to the westernmost tip of the country. In response, France and Britain sent troops to defend Belgium at Charleroi, Belgium. The French were routed on the 22nd of August. The British were then routed from Mons, Belgium on the 23rd of August. By the 25th of August, Germany had moved 1 million soldiers into Belgium and was poised to invade France. Meanwhile, the Russians suffered a defeat during the Battle of Tannenberg, which lasted from the 25th to the 31st of August. During the battle, the Russians suffered 125,000 casualties. The only Allied power to not be defeated in the first month of the war, which was August, was Serbia. In the background of Germany versus the rest of Europe, Austria-Hungary had tried to invade Serbia. Unlike Germany's powerful military, Austria-Hungary's, by comparison, was terrible. The first invasion of Serbia by Austria could only be described as tragic, as it lost 40,000 men in the process. In the following months, the Allies would fight a desperate and defensive war against the German army. At the Battle of the Marne, the Allies managed a counterattack which lasted from the 6th to the 10th of September. This ended the prospect of a quick and victorious war for Germany. The First Battle of Ypres, which lasted from October 17th to November 21st, resulted in the British Expeditionary Force being almost wiped out. However, the line was held. By December, trench warfare had made its debut. On December 25th, however, both sides called for a ceasefire to celebrate Christmas. The next day, the war continued. During the second year of the war, France would attempt to reclaim land lost to the Germans. This would result in the deaths of thousands in exchange for only a few miles. Elsewhere, the British had been building up their forces by recalling soldiers from their many colonies around the world. By spring, Britain had 500,000 soldiers in France prepared to take the offensive. Instead, the Germans struck first. The Second Battle of Ypres would be a slaughter that would last 21 days. The first day of the battle, April 22nd, 1915, was the introduction of chemical warfare, with a 4-mile wide cloud of chlorine gas released by the Germans advancing on the Allied trenches. The battle ended on May 13th. Soldiers commented that the gas caused excruciating pain. 12 days earlier, on May 1st, both the Gull Flight, an American ship, and Lusitania were sunk by German U-boats. Now then, the interesting thing about the Second Battle of Ypres was that the goal of the German soldiers and their army was to not capture the territory or the land, but was to sap the strength of the Allied armies with the use of a ghastly tactic called attrition. During this year of the war, new weapons made their debut, and others received the spotlight. Machine guns and artillery saw extensive use throughout the war, and flamethrowers, while not effective, caused the morale of the Allied soldiers to suffer. Chemical warfare also left its mark during the war. After Ypres, the German army moved to a more defensive position in the Western Front. This lasted for the rest of 1915, and this was because Austria-Hungary had yet again failed to invade Serbia and needed to be saved. In May, Italy had joined the Allied powers and attacked Austria-Hungary, which resulted in the first 4 battles of the Isonzo, which claimed 44,000 soldiers altogether. By the end of 1915, the Allies had launched an invasion that was intended to knock the Ottoman Empire, which joined the Central Powers in November of 1914, out of the war. To summarize, it was a disaster. The third year of this war began with plans from the German military to attack the French city of Verdun. While not strategically important, Verdun was a city that France was emotionally attached to and would defend the city to the last man. This was their plan, to drain the strength of the French army by sieging Verdun. The first day of the battle was considered one of the bloodiest in the war. Every French unit in their army had spent time in Verdun and were mentally broken because of it. At the same time, the Battle of the Somme River had commenced. British forces tried to take the pressure off of their French ally at Verdun, but tried to launch a huge offensive on June 24th, 29th, over 1.5 million artillery shells pounded the German positions for 6 days. On July 1st, the Allied infantry went over the top, and it was the single most bloody battle in the war. Worse than the first day of Verdun. On average, 83 British soldiers were either killed or wounded every minute. In the end, over 60,000, 1/3 killed in action, were casualties for the British. On the Eastern Front, the Russians invaded Austria-Hungary in an attempt to relieve the hard-pressed French at Verdun. In June, the invasion began. It achieved success with some 400,000 Austrians surrendering, which resulted in Germany having to save Austria once again. In September, the British attacked the German trenches with a new weapon, the tank. Though it was a useful weapon, too few were produced to make a difference. By mid-December, the siege of Verdun had ended, and the Russians had been kicked out of Austria-Hungary. Italy had fought 5 more battles at the Isonzo, and Romania joined the Allies. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on the Central Powers. This was because of a multitude of reasons. The biggest of those, of course, the United States being economically invested in the war in Europe, more specifically economically invested with the Allied powers. The other reasons, of course, were the constant unrestricted submarine warfare and the Zimmermann telegram. On April 16th, French infantry went over the top and fought for 10 days, losing 187,000 men. On April 29th, 1917, the entire French army mutinied out of protest of the inhumane orders issued by the French High Command. At Ypres, the British packed tunnels of explosives and killed 20,000 German soldiers. At the Third Battle of Ypres, mustard gas was used against the British to great effect. On August 19th, the 11th Battle of the Isonzo lasted until September 12th and drained the Italian army's manpower, but brought the Austrian army close to collapse. The Battle of Caporetto started on October 24th and ended on November 12th. Italy lost 305,000 soldiers, and Italy had been knocked out of the war. On June 28, 1917, the first American troops arrived. After several skirmishes, the American forces proved their worth in the European theater. On March 21st, 1918, the Germans began Operation Michael. This was the first appearance of the Sturmtruppen units, or stormtroopers, the British Fifth Army collapses. The Germans attack Ypres again on April 9th. After 20 days, they give up. June 6, 1918. The battle at Belleau Woods begins and ends on June 25th with an Allied victory. On September 26th, the assault into the Argonne began and would be the most important fight of the war. It ended on October 10th, 1918, with an Allied victory. Later, the war would end on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month for the purpose of looking good. On June 28, 1919, the Treaty of Versailles was signed and the war was over. What was agreed upon in the treaty, however, would eventually lead to World War II. While this war, World War I, is overshadowed by World War II, it is nonetheless one of the most important periods in human history, because it is a moment in time in which pretty much the entire world was at war with one another. And for that, we must remember World War I. Thank you for listening.